Hello YouTube, today another quick video, or relatively quick, of some basic safety tips for using knives and folding saws when you're out in the bushcraft areas, or woodlands normally, because that's where you're likely to find things that you need to cut. So I've got a few pieces of deadfall that I've dragged up from just very close by, and these are the two tools that I'll be showing you. As I say, the knife first. When you're not using a knife, it should be kept in its sheath, obviously, because if you've got it out, I'll move the camera down actually while I'm doing this. Right, when you're not using your knife, obviously, as I just said, you want to keep it in its sheath, because if you've got it laying on the ground, it's quite easy for bits of leaves to cover it up while you're walking around, and it makes it very hard to see. And if you're feeling around for it to try and grab it, or even if you can see it and you can't tell which end is which, you go to grab it, then you can grab the blade and cut yourself. So that's the first tip. And taking it out of its sheath, the usual tip for most sheaths, mainly leather sheaths, is push your thumb on the top part of the sheath to push it away, and then pull it out the rest of the way, so you release that initial grab, because most sheaths or designed to grab the knife to stop it sliding out. So just don't push it to de-click it, I suppose is one way of saying it, and then pull it out. Never grab the sheath and pull it out, because if it's a leather sheath or a fabric sheath, the blade can cut through the side and cut your fingers, so that's another bad thing. When you're cutting, you want to look at your legs and make sure that you're cutting outside of the sort of the triangular shape that you see. Imagine that line across the legs. You want to be cutting anywhere in this area here, so because you have femoral arteries in your femurs, next to your femurs or in your thighs, so you don't want to cut those when you slip or anything like that. Also, another thing is you want to make sure that the knife is nice and sharp, because that way it takes less force to push on it. A sharper knife is a much safer knife. If you've try to use a blunt knife and you're forcing it to try and cut through and you slip, there's a lot of force behind that slip, so it can dig into your skin or someone else's skin as well. So that's another thing you don't want to do. Make sure that there's no one around you, obviously, or near you, because you can't decide what other people are going to do. You've got no way of knowing. They can do very random things at times. So you make sure you're nice and clear. There's no branches or other things that are impeding your movement. You've got a nice open space around you. I'll zoom out a bit. So you've got a nice open space around you. And as I say, when you're cutting, you want to get your knife out, obviously, and cut outside of this triangle, using motions away from yourself, never toward yourself. Try and not to get your hand too close to the part you're cutting, because if you're cutting fast and you bring it back to go in again, you can tilt and push into your skin like that as you're trying to cut. So try and hold it a little way away. Obviously it depends on the size of the piece of wood you're trying to cut. Try and hold it steady. It's alright, there's a road right over there, so sorry about the noise. Try and hold it steady so that it doesn't wobble around too much, and then you can cut away to your heart's content. As I say, always cut away from yourself and other people. So that's that one. There's several ways to hold a knife. There's the normal way, where the blade is in line with these knuckles here, the second knuckles down, so that you're using push cuts basically. There's the backwards cut, which is for cutting string or rope when someone else is holding the string or rope. You don't want to cut towards them, because as I say, people do random things. You can't guarantee what they're going to do, so that one's safer coming towards yourself. And then there's the third way, which is at 90 degrees, so the blade is pointing at the first set of knuckles. I've got a plane coming across now. So that this one's used for wedge cuts. try and move into the better place. Right, sorry about that, the plane was going past. As I say, the first knuckle, the 90-degree cut, or the lever cut as you'll see in a minute, the blade pointing straight towards the first set of knuckles there is for when you have a piece of wood and you want to get a bit of extra leverage to cut, using your chest, pushing on your chest with this row of fingers or knuckles and the heel of the knife, or the pommel of the knife, again cutting away from yourself. So that's that one. Also, you want to make sure that put the knife back, you want to make sure that the piece of timber you're cutting is an appropriate length. Obviously you don't want a huge grit piece like this as you're trying to hold it and carve away at it, because that's, people are going to walk around and they can kick the end and then knock it as you're cutting it, and you can send the knife all over the place. So try and find pieces that are nearest sort of size to what you want, and I'll get onto the saw in a moment for reducing sizes. Same thing with, if you're cutting feather sticks, then you want a piece of wood that's probably a 2.5, 3 foot long, something like that, or roughly the size, the length of your arm, from your armpit to your fingers, so that you can rest it on the ground like so, and that way you can cut your feather sticks. This is a little bit too long, this one, but you can cut your feather sticks nice and easily there. And when you're holding the blade, try and hold it at 90 degrees or sort of, to the timber, to the wood, and sort of parallel to the ground, because if you've got it tilted up, or tilted down rather, so the point is pointing up and your hand slips down, the point can dig into your fingers. So if you imagine like that, you can slip down and it can catch the edge of your knuckle there. And same if you go that way, if your hand slips off of it, it can slide off and catch the tip, and which is also pretty sharp even from the back. So try and use it in a sort of that sort of manner, so that it's parallel to the ground. The spine is sort of parallel to the ground, and the cutting edge is as well, and that should make things a little bit easier. Then you can cut away at your feather sticks. Probably a better side to see that. Okay, so that's most of the knife side of things. I'll go into axes and larger saws in another video probably. I'm not sure when I'll get around to doing that. So I think that's all that's involved with the knife. If I think of anything else, I'll add it on later. So onto the saw. Similar thing with a knife. If it hasn't got a locking mechanism to keep the blade locked when it's sort of not in use, then you want to try and keep it in a sheath or a pouch or something like that, just so that it doesn't open out by mistake, so that you don't cut yourself on the teeth when you grab it. And that just, and as I say, keep it shut when it's not in use as well, if it's got a lock-in blade. So as I say, if it's laying around like that and you go to grab it, the same thing as the knife, although it's not quite as sharp as the knife from a touch, it can make a very messy gash on your fingers. So that's that one. When you're cutting, again the same rule. You want to, oops, kneeling on things around here. You want to cut outside of that triangle. You can bring your knees together a bit better this time. So you want to cut this outside, so if it slips off the end, it's going to cut into the ground rather than into your leg. And holding the piece of timber, you want to hold it on the furthest side from you, so that if the blade jumps, it hits the underside of your wrist like that. So if you're using it this side, the blade can jump out when you're drawing back, and it can sort of catch on your knuckles and the back of your hand there and rip a big hole in it. There's usually a lanyard on the back of a knife, well, knife and a and a folding saw. And there's a plane going over again. Right, the lanyard on the back, as I was saying before the plane interrupted us, there's several ways you can do it, or 2 ways you can do it that I know of. That's the simple one. Is you put your thumb through the lanyard and then you wrap it over the back of your hand like so. You can see that in there. So your thumb goes in, roll your hand round, and then grab that, and grab the handle of the saw. And that basically means that when you're sawing it and it catches, your hand doesn't slip off of the saw or further onto the blade. The other way, if you've got a different length lanyard or a nice thick sort of lanyard that doesn't cut into your skin too much, is just stick your arm through and twist it round several times and then grab the saw like that. So you can see all that twisted up at the back there, and that does exactly the same thing, stops your hand sliding forwards and backwards as you're cutting. So when you get to cut, hand over the top so that the saw's underneath your wrist. And I'm not sure if you can see this very well from there, so I'll turn around facing this way. So hand over the top, saw underneath, and then you can start sawing, and then if it jumps out, it's not going to catch on any fleshy bits of your hand. So I won't cut all the way through that. I don't need to cut any wood at the moment. And that's pretty much it. There's very little other sort of situations where you're likely to be using a folding saw. Sometimes you'll want to cut into the end sort of a piece of timber. In that situation, ideally you want to find some sort of log, preferably bigger than this one, so that you can stand on the end and cut into it. If you need to steady it while you're cutting, make a little bridge with your fingers. You can see that over the blade like that to hold it on the sides. It's probably not too safe still, but it should give you somewhere to hold the blade or guide the blade without the risk of cutting into yourself. And it's also cutting outside of your sort of danger area. If it does slip off the end, it's going to hit into the log or this branch or whatever you're using as a rest, rather than coming straight back and getting your leg. And you're also not holding it like that, which obviously is asking for trouble, because if you slip off backwards, it's going to cut right through your thumb. And again, your thumb has its own blood supply, which is very dangerous if you cut that as well. It's not as dangerous as a femoral artery, but it is still pretty dangerous. Any cuts are bad news in the woods, especially with saws and other things you've been used to cutting wood, as they can carry tetanus and things like that. So, right, so that's, put this in the case properly, turn the camera back up. Right, that plane's gone again now, or should be out of microphone range anyway, or mostly. So that should pretty much cover use of those 2 items. That's the knife and the saw, the folding saw. As I say, I'll go into other things such as the axe and larger saws in another video, but that's the most common bushcraft cutting tools you're likely to come across and use in the woods. So hopefully that's been a bit of use. I know you've probably seen lots and lots of knife safety videos, and there are definitely lots on the internet, but when it comes to safety and trying to avoid accidents, and you can never have too much, so hopefully that's been of some use. So thanks for watching, see you next time.